Hi everybody, this is Brandon Finnegan, Director of Elections here at DDHQ. Now after one of our bigger primary nights of the year, things are a little bit quieter this week, but there's still some interesting and important races to follow. This week we'll have primaries in Connecticut, Minnesota, Vermont, and Wisconsin, including a special U.S. House race in Minnesota. Now before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and if you enjoy these videos, be sure to click that little bell down there so you're notified as soon as they're released and give them a like. Let's go ahead and get on to the elections. So first up, the Badger State, Wisconsin. Polls close here at 8 p.m. Central Time. Now the biggest primary of the night is going to be the Republican primary for governor. Former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefich is facing off against businessman Tim Michels, who owns the very large Michels Infrastructure Corporation. Now Michels has been endorsed by former President Donald Trump, and part of it kind of stems from some tweets that date back a few years, where Kleefich had posted a picture of her kid kind of posing with the kid of Wisconsin Supreme Court Chief Justice Brian Hagedorn. And you may remember, Brian Hagedorn didn't seem to have much of an interest in really doing anything regarding the 2020 election, and that, well, obviously did not make former President Trump very happy. On Kleefich's side of things, she's been endorsed by former Governor Scott Walker, former South Carolina Governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, former Vice President Mike Pence, current U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, and 58 Republican members of the state legislature. She may have a lot of endorsement basically from the local Wisconsin establishment, but Michael has the endorsement of former President Trump. And this is just the latest in a long list of skirmishes that the former president has held against other Republican office holders or even proxy office holders. So we'll have to see how things play out here. Now, whenever you're watching Wisconsin for a Republican statewide contest, there's some key areas that you're going to want to watch in the state. The way I look at it is, where are the very big Republican areas in the state? We're all familiar with the WOW, Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington County, the suburbs that surround Milwaukee. But there's also the BOW, Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago. And these are kind of the Fox Cities, Green Bay, that string of post-industrial areas up in the northeast portion of the state. It's taken a conservative turn in recent years, and whenever the BOW came in pretty strongly for a Republican in a general election, and the WOW, of course, was considerably red, Republicans tend to do very well statewide. There's a large bastion of Republican votes in both of these areas. And typically, if a candidate has enough strength to win statewide in their Republican primary, they carry both regions. There's also the western portion of the state, and this area that basically makes up, for lack of a better description, current Congressman Ron Kind, District 3 in Wisconsin. That whole territory to the west that runs along the border with Minnesota and kind of skirts a little bit inland. It actually has voted back and forth, typically picking whoever is the winner in a general election. But in more recent years, it's become more and more conservative. And so much so that Congressman Ron Kind is retiring and is not running for re-election this November. That's another area that you're going to want to watch. It's not going to have nearly as many Republican votes there, but it's still going to be interesting to see who it picks. My inclination would be to believe that Michels is probably going to do very well in western Wisconsin, and he may do well in the northern part of the state, and then it's going to be a street fight for him over the traditionally Republican areas surrounding Milwaukee. Now, it's important, even though we look at a map of Wisconsin, see those big blue areas, Dane County with Madison and Milwaukee County with Milwaukee. We don't tend to think that there is Republicans in both counties, but there are. There's a substantial number of Republicans that live in both counties, and we'll have to see how they're going to pull. If I were being asked, and you really wanted to know where I felt things would be, I would assume that Kleefich may do a little bit better in Milwaukee and Dane than Michels, but we're still going to have to see how those middling areas play out for both candidates. Now, there are other races, of course. There's states' legislative races we're covering in Wisconsin, congressional primaries we're covering in Wisconsin. There would have, until very recently, been an interesting race to watch for potentially the U.S. Senate Democratic primary, but 3 of the top 4 main candidates dropped out, and so that's cleared the field for current Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, setting up a pretty much guaranteed race between Barnes and incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson. So let's kind of move on to another state just to the west of Wisconsin, Minnesota. Polls close here at the same time, 8 p.m. Central. The biggest race of the whole night, I would argue, is actually not a primary, but the special election here in Minnesota, particularly in Congressional District 1. That was caused by the death of Republican Congressman Jim Hagedorn. The district runs along the southern border with Iowa and includes Rochester and Mankato. Republican Brand Finstad is the favorite over Democratic candidate Jeff Ettinger. Now, but with all special elections and midterm years, people tend to look at these contests for clues. They try to use them as tea leaves, if you will, to give them an indicator of, which party tends to have the strength, which party seems to have the oomph. We're just coming off of what we saw out of Kansas, but we're also coming off of several weeks of elections where we've seen Republicans, increase their voter turnout in primaries compared to 2018. So we're going to need to see in this race, at least those people who are obsessed enough with this, do we see Finstad beat Hagedorn's margin from 2020? Does he run worse than that margin from 2020? And they're going to read into this and every other little clue they can to try to tell them what they think is going to happen in November. For me, I like watching any special election because, hey, it's an opportunity to see something, learn something perhaps new that we didn't know about the political movements within a state. If you want to take this as something that will indicate what might actually happen in November, hey, we all have our divinations and our theories, if we will, pet theories, if we will, about how midterms work out. There are 2 other states that are holding primaries beyond the Midwest: Connecticut, whose polls close at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and Vermont, whose polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be covering all the federal, statewide, and state legislative races in both states, although at least from a national level, there hasn't really been any major skirmishes in either state that people outside or nationally have been really focusing on. But they still matter, and we at the Decision Desk are going to be covering them and bringing those returns to you, along with those out of Minnesota and Wisconsin. So that's going to do it for us for this week. Like I said, it's a little bit of a shorter week. Please go ahead and subscribe, and sign up for more notifications of more videos and previews that we'll be having in the future. We'll be back next week with previews of Hawaii, Alaska, and Wyoming. Until then, I'm Brandon Finnegan. Thank you all for watching.